This is the Jewish Holocaust Center Oral Testimony History Project. I am interviewing on the 21st of May 1993 Mr. Leopold Pfefferberg from United States, and my name is Kicia Altman. We are very grateful to you that on your brief visit to Melbourne, which is personal, you gave us some time.
I'm delighted to give you lots of
Thank
time.
you very much. Unfortunately, I already know that we don't have a limited time, so we have to skip a lot of niceties that I would like to say to you, among others that there's hardly anybody in Melbourne that doesn't know your contribution to the publishing and writing the book of Schindler's Ark. So we are all very eager to hear your story. Mr. Pfefferberg, I am sure that you realize the importance of oral testimony.
I know very well, because we are having the same method in Los Angeles, California. Particularly my organization, where I was one of the founders, the 1939 Club, established a Holocaust chair of education at UCLA, and we made a testimony from all the survivors of the
Marvelous, marvelous. So we would briefly like to hear something about your background, which in itself, as a Polish Jew, is unusual.
I was born in Kraków on March the 20th, 1913, to make me today 80 years old, or 80 years young, I will put it this
right,
way.
Absolutely. Old is not a word
In
that
Kraków, in a very famous Polish city, what has a tremendous Jewish population, close to 80,000 population, very highly educated Jewish population. Many of those people were famous rabbis, professors, teachers, and so forth. I have the privilege that I finished the high school, the government-sponsored high school in Kraków. And
Jewish?
No. My sister was finishing the Hebrew gymnasium. I was finishing the Polish gymnasium.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, may I say something, I was just in Poland 2 weeks ago, and I was invited by my gymnasium to speak to graduating classes over there, because I'm one of the oldest survivors of this of this high school, and I have also privilege in 1934 to teach there for 6 months. So it was a coincidence. The principal asked me to come over, and I was delighted to be there. And then I entered university in Kraków, and I finished the medical school physical education department, what gave me permission to teach beside subject anatomy, biology, physiology, physical education. I always was an officer in the rank of lieutenant in Polish army.
Was that a usual thing that a Jew could become an officer in the Polish army?
No, they're very unusual. You have to be extraordinary trained killer to become an officer in the Polish army.
I thought that you become a killer after being a trained officer.
Yes. May I tell you something? But your moral standard, you understand, doesn't allow you to kill the people. So when I was in the front line, I was shooting, but I was praying that my bullets will never hit.
And how come that you were accepted into the rank of officer, and in what year?
I finished the officer school in 1936, and I never suspect that I will be ever given the rank of lieutenant in Polish army, but because I finished in the first 3 in Arabs officers school over there in Bydgoszcz.
How long when did you start the officer school? What I would like to establish, did you start at in time of Piłsudski?
Yeah. In 1935, I volunteered to go to the officer school. I just finished the
university. And what was your degree of education at that time?
I just finished the university of Graduate University of Kraków, and I decided to go to the army, to the officer school, even that I didn't have to. And because I need this education to eventually teach the military preparation in high school, I volunteered and I went. They sent me to the worst possible officer school, to the Bydgoszcz, when 99% were the German descent of the Polish population over there. but I managed to survive there, and I finished in a position of third the best in the class. And I never suspect I will be nominated, but I was very lucky. Year and a half, on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of Polish independence, the Polish government select 1,000 candidates, officer candidates, to be nominated on the special occasion.
The
And
20th anniversary was the of Polish independence.
November
was the-
11, 1938.
Yeah, which was also the last anniversary.
Also the last one. And I was the only Jewish candidate selected to this great honor, and I consider this a very great honor because coincidentally on this same day, honorary lieutenant of Polish army was King Michael of Romania. And we look like twin brothers, exactly the same. You understand? I have picture of Michael of Romania and my picture of this period of time, we look like twin brothers. So it was very interesting because in all the papers was my picture, but this was not mine, it was King Michael of Romania picture. And then after when I finished the officer school, I was teaching.
Did you attend the event? The
Yeah,
special
sure,
event?
in Warsaw we got all these papers and everything from the President Mościcki in Warsaw on the November 11, 1938. So this was a great honor anyway, but this can happen, you see. Then I became a full-fledged teacher, you understand. I finished the university, I got master degree in education, and I was teaching in all the Jewish high school in Kraków.
Not in Polish. Not in Polish high schools.
No, I was practicing in some Polish high school, but only for the practicing. Besides, the government school didn't pay so well. The private Jewish gymnasium was paying much.
Mr. Pfefferberg, do you come from a traditional Jewish background, assimilated Jewish background,
I am coming
deeply religious?
No, I'm coming from traditional Jewish background. My parents was a little bit more assimilated, and I became very much assimilated. Particularly that I was in a high school that was Polish gymnasium, and then on the university I was the only Jew on my faculty.
What was your father's profession?
My father was a representative of a very big company from Germany for Poland. They were importing coffee and nuts and raisins from all over the world, and my father was representing till the Hitler.
Artykuły korzenne,
Yeah.
spożywcze i korzenne.
My mother was interior decorator, very famous in Kraków, and very successful too because
That we know,
Yes.
of course, from
Yes.
the book.
yeah, and a beautiful woman, very lovely, gorgeous eye, blue eyes and dark black hair. And I had a sister, was a beautiful girl.
Do I assume rightly that you were speaking Polish at home?
We were speaking mostly Polish.
And,
My father and mother, they spoke sometimes Yiddish, so we understood a little bit, not too much, but we were concentrated mostly on the Polish language.
yes.
Polish literature, Polish education, Polish schools. So my sister spoke Hebrew because she finished Hebrew gymnasium. Coincidentally, I didn't have the privilege, so I didn't speak Hebrew, even that I was teaching in the Hebrew gymnasium. So this was a little bit different.
Was there a special reason why they sent your younger sister to a Hebrew gymnasium while you attended the government?
See,
was there a special reason?
When I started, when I was 10 years old and I was going to gymnasium, my parents financially couldn't afford a private school. When my sister the situation was improved and they have enough money to pay, means and ways to pay for her education, and they considered that the Hebrew school in Kraków, the Hebrajskie Gymnasium, was one of the highest educational institution, I would say, in Poland. All the students who finish this particular school has to make 2 maturas or 2 final examinations, the Polish matura and the Hebrew matura. And many of them who survived became tremendous successful people in every field that they choose in.
Mr. Pfefferberg, seeing that you went to a non-Jewish school, Did you form friendships with Poles?
I have a fantastic connection with Poles. I was always a very good sportsman, swimmer and runner and skier and fighter, anything you wanted. So I always established myself pretty good, and I have a very good relation with all my colleagues, even after the war.
So that means that you did not encounter anti-Semitism in your youth.
I would say that this is a very strong statement, because anti-Semitism is not considered as a major sickness. I would put it more that was individual type. You see, you cannot say, for example, but I have to underline this every time, that the Polish population, what was before the war, about 35 million population, you cannot say that 35 million
were
Poles
anti-Semites.
anti-Semite. There were minority groups, index, and all the right wings, politically inclined people, what they taking from home or from church or from surrounding people.
But
what they
on a personal level.
on the personal level, during the university time, I was going to the university in 1931 to 1934. They were the biggest uprising, anti-Semitic uprising, created by the right-wing students. But I have tremendous support from my colleagues, from my faculty, and I attend all the classes. Even then was signed, the Jews and pigs cannot enter. The simple things, I took the sign down and I entered the room. They said, "You are not afraid?" I said, "I am very much afraid. They will beat me up or something like this." But I told them that when they are in group, they are stronger than a single person, but I can find them individually later on the street, and I will find out how to finish with them. Okay?
That's
So,
right. Politically, was your family aware of what's going on in the world, what's going on in Germany? Did you discuss Hitler at home?
we were very well aware what is going in the world. We knew that the war will be sooner or later, particularly in 1938, when the Jews were coming from Germany and Sudeten-German. Yes. We are accepting the family. We have two families in our house in Kraków, one from Czechoslovakia. And one was from Slovakia and one was from Czechoslovakia, but we can call this Czechoslovakia. But what families? One, even the family survived the war and they live in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, one of the sisters of these people. And we have the information. My father was very highly educated. My mother was very bright woman, was not as highly educated as my father or myself or my sister, but was extremely intelligent person, and we knew what is going on in the world.
Did you believe it?
That will happen, what happened in 1942, 43, no. I never believed that will happen. I give you a good example.
Was there a talk about immigration? Were you talking about the possibility
We were talking about the immigration, yes. We were talking about the immigration. I have possibility to go away, but because I was an officer in Polish army, I couldn't get a passport. But for me to go through the border was no problem. I knew the Tatry and Karpaty very well, all the skiing areas and things like this. For me to cross the borders was no problem. But for my parents, it was a problem. So
you have decided to stay?
We decided to stay because we never suspect that something what happened later on will ever happen in a country was a highly cultured and educated as we know from the history. What happened?
Do you remember the actual outbreak of the war? What are your personal memories?
I remember very, very well, because when the war started, I was already a company commander in Rzeszów, and we were preparing ourselves to the...
Were you called up?
I was on a special secret mobilization papers, telephone call. There were some people specializing in certain things were called by the telephone, and that's what it is. I was already on the Friday, September the 1st. I was already I was in the uniform all the time because I always organized the aircraft preparation in our city. I was one of the section commander over there. So I was but then I got a call. I jumped on the train. I went to my outfit, that was in Rzeszów. This is about a couple hundred kilometers from Kraków, and the war started.
And
I was company commander. We went south of Rzeszów towards Nowy Sącz, Stary Sącz, and Zakopane to stop the motorized army what crossed the southern borders through the Carpathy and Tatra and attack Poland from the south. We couldn't stop them because their tremendous firepower they have with the mother arms, what we didn't possess. They pushed us back, and we start to retreat towards Przemyśl and Lwów. On the 11th of the September, I was wounded. I was taken back by my orderly. He saved my life. And then we were retreating in Przemyśl. I entered the hospital in Przemyśl. And over there, coincidentally, the doctor in charge was Professor Lot, professor of the University of Warsaw, professor of anatomy. And when he found out
Jewish?
No, he was a very famous professor of the university in Warsaw, in medical school. When he found out that I finished physical education, I have 3.5 years of medical studies, he accepted me as his assistant. And that after the pact between Russia and Germany, they came to us. We were already prisoner of war of the German army because Przemyśl was occupied by Germans.
That means you lost your freedom of movement?
No, this was interesting. They give us to all the people involved in the hospital, the doctor, the assistants and things, a special documents allowing us to go to the city in the uniform, because we were wearing still the military uniform, with the Red Cross band, and pick up the wounded people and bring them to hospital, operated and things like this. And by the end of September, when the Russians supposed to take over the part on the east side of River San, because the River San became a border between the Germany, occupation forces of Germany in Poland and Russian occupation forces in Poland, River San became the border between the two countries. They give us a choice to go to the Russian as a Russian prisoner of war, or to go to the Germany as a German prisoner of war. Now some of my colleague officers and the doctor decided to go to the Russian. Later I found out that they were all killed in Katyn. I decided to go west to Germany. I figured out that they will obey the Geneva Convention rules better than the Russians.
Did you have any news from your family by that time?
No, nothing. I wasn't in the contact with them at all. And we decided, some of these people, I would say majority of the officers, decided to go to the German prisoner of war. But when we were passing by to the city of Kraków, I got a bright idea to escape, and I was lucky. I escaped from the train, from the group, and I arrived home. And then
Did you still wear your Polish?
No, we burned it right away. Except the pants, because the pants and the boots I kept, because...
So you have arrived home, and what did you find in your city?
I found my mother, my father, my sister were all there waiting for
Were you in the ghetto already?
No, this was in September. This was, I would say, in October 1945. The ghetto didn't exist yet.
That was October 79.
We didn't even have the Arband yet in this time. When I came in, I have to hide because the Gestapo already was informed that I escaped, and because the lady who was supervisor of our building, Kastruszka, you understand, she said she always liked me very much because I always give her a
big tip.
No, I give her 4 months salary, so I have a key to the house, you know.
Yeah.
She said, Poldek, you have to watch your step because they are coming here from the police asking for you. So I understood that the Gestapo was. So I was not staying in a home.
Yes.
Till one day I came home and I met Schindler this way. Almost didn't kill him.
Now, could you tell us about it?
You see, one day I came to my mother. I always came in a different time of hours that I didn't suspect.
But you were in touch, in contact.
I was in
with
Kraków,
her.
yeah, I was in Kraków. And I came to see my mother. Nobody was home, only my mother and I. Then somebody was knocking on the door. And my mother was looking through the lookout, yeah. And she see a gentleman with a hacking cloth. So she said to me, Gestapo. And I still have my little pistol, my dressy pistol that I was using to impress the girl when I was dating them, and was in uniform. So, but it was still a dangerous piece of weapon. I put this behind my belt and figured out I will find out. Yeah. But later I found out that this guy is not a Gestapo, that is a German businessman who came over to my mother to redecorate his apartment, what he bought it. He got free, but he paid the money to the owner of the apartment, $50,000, for all his belongings. What was there, what I consider in this time was a very big amount of money.
Yes,
it was
and
about $10,000.
Yes. And
we became friends on the first day we met. A German, handsome industrialist and an officer of Polish Army.
Did you keep in touch with him?
Till he died, yes.
No, I don't mean till he
during
died.
All the time continue, and when
from that meeting
from this minute of time I was on daily basis with him till I went to Plaszów, first to Ghetto. In Ghetto, yes. I was coming to him every day on the bicycle. The minute I left Ghetto, I took the armband down and was going there.
And how come such a relationship developed? He came.
I don't know what is, you see, two men meeting, forgetting about the. They met, they look in the eyes of each other. I look in his eye, he looks in my eyes. And we knew that we will be friends. I don't know how this happened. He respects me, I respect him, and that's all what it is. And through all the period of war, from this particular day till the liberation, he always was thinking how to help me or support me, or even he pulled me, even that I originally never worked for him in his factory.
Did not.
I did. He asked me to come to Emalia, to his factory, from the first day he opened it. But I always dreaming that I have to be a free hand to run. I want to run.
And where did you work in the ghetto?
In the ghetto, I was working in a few places. I was working first in my uncle, who was a metal sheet master. Yeah. And then I was working in the Heeres Unterkunft, what his brother was in charge over there. And my wife was, I was married in
1940.
1940, and in July 15, 1940, and my wife was a very young girl. She was 19 and a half years when I married her, and I was 27 and a half, so I was already an old man.
Just to deviate from the life history, a very personal question.
Okay.
How come that you married in ghetto?
I didn't marry in ghetto. I married in 1940. The ghetto didn't exist. The ghetto was established.
All right, but you.
When I married, it is when somebody will tell me in December 1939 that in July 1940 I will get married. I said, take the biggest hammer you can find and knock it out from your head. What happens? My wife is an extraordinary young lady in this time, and very bright, very intelligent. And she still is the extraordinary, beautiful lady today, after 53 years of marriage, extremely bright, extremely intelligent, highly. And she never finished university because she studied in Vienna just when the Hitler came in, and then she's supposed to go to Switzerland to study medicine, but she couldn't go there because the war started, and after the war, was no chance to go. We have to make a living.
Yes. So.
But I was the stronger one in this time. Today she is stronger.
Would I be right in assuming that even in 1940, almost half a year after or more than half a year after the Nazi Germany occupied Krakow, you still did not have any indication of what's
there were already
ahead of you.
atrocities in Krakow. There were some special rules, but technique what they were using was excellent. You see, they asked to use the armband, you understand, for protection against the Polish people. But don't worry, nothing will happen to you, we will be protecting you. Then when they were talking
That's very interesting. The Nazis told you to wear the armband as a protection from Polish
and beside
people,
this, they will
from Polish people.
This is one reason. The other reason also that they should recognize who is a Jew, who is not
But that they
Jew.
didn't specify.
Yes, but why? Because we found out this way they can catch people on the street to the slave labor on the spot regardless of position. I was teaching the high school was open, the Jewish high school was open till the end of December 1939, and one day they called me to a work, even that I show a special document that I am teacher, you see, and I have to go and shovel the snow, you see. Then they organized a little bit different to the Jewish Gemeinde, that they were asking every day to deliver so and so many people, and people who didn't want to go have to pay for the people who are going for them.
So by that time was the Judenrat formed?
Judenrat was formed right away. Right away, there were lots of intelligent and bright people who were...
What was your attitude to the role of Judenrat at that time?
In this time, Judenrat was very supporting the Jewish population. They didn't expect that they will become a tool later on of the Germans. But slowly they start to tighten the screws. There were tremendous amount of restriction, the hours when the people can walk on the street, the places where they can attend, the trolley card what has to be divided, the amount of money the Jews can have with them. Then the restriction to give it to them all the fur coat, radios, silver, jewelry, and when they didn't give it to them or they considered it was not enough, they closed certain section of the Jewish city or Jewish section or some Jewish apartment, but they knew exactly who is Jewish, not Jewish. They were taking, we lost our apartment with everything what my parents were working for it, and we lost everything in 5 minutes, never got back.
Do you remember the date when the ghetto was formed?
Exactly, I remember the date. The ghetto was formed in March, and by March 1941. By end of this March, every Jew who has permission to stay in Krakow has to be in the ghetto. You see, you got the special Ken Karta, special.
Yeah.
Those people who didn't receive any
What
permission,
was the criteria?
they can go any place they wish to go.
What was the criteria of the permission?
The essential people who can work or they were working for German establishment. That was the first one. And professional like mechanics, welders, chemists, you know, people what they can utilize in a certain type of work.
Krakow was not included in the German Reich?
No, it was not, but was a centrum of the government, occupation forces government. And I have to state that it's an interesting story. When they start to make the restriction, anything disobeying those restrictions was penalty of that.
Yes.
Anytime when later on the Polish people wants to help some of the friends, Jewish friends, was penalty of that. This was the only country in Europe when they were really penalize everybody with penalty of that. Not in Germany, not in France, not in Holland, not in Sweden or Belgium. In any other country occupied by Germany, there were not such strong restrictions.
Did you receive any help prior to the ghetto or in the ghetto from your Polish non-Jewish
Tremendous
friends?
help, I would say tremendous. I have tremendous amount of friends from the army, from the university, from the high school, from sport activities. So it was no problem. They were helping me tremendously. Otherwise, I couldn't survive the way I survived. And every time when I was in the city, I could stop in any of my friends' houses, have a lunch.
Did you have to wear the...
When I was going outside, I tried to be Paul. I don't know why, because it was easier for me. I have a bicycle. I was driving on the bicycle.
It was also easier for your friends.
Yes, yeah, and then mostly I was also with my friends. So I don't know how to. It's very hard looking retroactive to explain you why I did things what I did.
Sure.
You see, when I will
Where did you stand in face of the restrictions? Were you allowed, did you belong to the group who was allowed to stay in Krakow?
In the beginning, not. Because my whole family, even my father was working in the Jewish Gemeinde, and I was working in the Jewish Gemeinde in the beginning of the 1940, you see, they didn't allow us to go. And I got a brilliant idea to go to the mayor of the city, Mr. Paulus, and I asked him for permission to say he wasn't there. And they told me that is another gentleman who is
in charge.
Yes, Sepp Rail, his name. The names right away struck me that is very familiar.
Sepp
Rail.
Rail.
I entered his room, and there was a ski instructor who was teaching Polish skier in 1938 for the Federation International Ski, and I was his translator, and I attended his ski, and he was coming to my house.
Did you recognize him?
He recognized me right away, and he asked me, Poldi, was hast du schlecht gemacht?
Yeah.
That he was the only one guy who came to the transport and took me out and my wife out from the transport. From this day, I never saw him again. I never saw him during the war or after the war. I never heard what happened to him. But
Did you try to find
he
him?
gave me the card, but he didn't give the permission to my parents and my sister.
He did not?
No. And my father, and they went to Sanok. Because in this time, they allowed to go them any place they wanted. You see, they were not, you cannot say in Krakow, you can go any place you wanted. And the people went in different direction to a small town.
Smaller towns.
My parents and my brother-in-law and my sister went to Sanok because my brother-in-law family lived in Sanok. They picked it up and they figured out that maybe they can cross the border to Russia. But they never did. My sister and my brother-in-law went on the area paper, got caught in Warsaw and executed in Warsaw. My parents disappeared from Sanok, where with all the Sanok people probably. They went to Helm or to Belzec or something like that. I don't know where they perished.
How far was Sanok from Krakow, more or less?
About, I would say, 300 to 400 kilometers.
Was still in the government?
Yeah, this was all occupied by the German. Yeah.
So, you stayed in Krakow, and what happened?
Then I went through the ghetto. From ghetto I went to Kraków Plaszów, and I was working as a welder in the garage because I saw a guy working.
Were you able to establish a contact with your parents?
No, no way.
So actually from
Kraków we have, from the ghetto we have some information. Even from my mother-in-law, she was a doctor. My wife's mother-in-law, my mother was a doctor, MD, and she was in Tarnów, in the ghetto in Tarnów, and she perished over there. There were all kinds of stories how she perished, but we don't know exactly. One of them, she didn't want to leave the sick people in a hospital in Tarnów. When they liquidate the hospital, they
and you and your wife stayed in the ghetto until the Judenrein, until the liquidation of the ghetto.
After the liquidation of the ghetto, they sent us to Plaszów.
together? You were still with your wife.
Yeah, she was working for Madrid, and I was working in a garage, and we were both in Kraków.
Could you say where was she working?
For Madrid company.
Madrid company.
And
yeah. Could you explain what it is?
Madrid company, this was a German owner who was having a tremendous factory, and he was serving the German army, repairing, cleaning, and making new outfit for the army.
Uniforms.
He was very successful, and he has about 3,000 people working for him. When Schindler, who opened also a factory and who was working with the army, has only in this particular time close to about 600 workers. When the Plaszow was liquidated, Schindler decided to save his people, and he got additional people from
and what about Madrid?
Madrid. He decided not to
do anything.
To take these people with Schindler to Brünlitz. He decided to grab his money and run, and he went to Vienna, and he was a very wealthy man. He lived in Vienna in a luxury after the war. He was recognized by Israel as a righteous gentleman because during the time when the people were working for him, he was very good for them, tried to help as much. To me, I consider that he didn't fulfill his obligation to those people who make him very wealthy, and ran like a rat to Vienna and died in Vienna a couple years ago.
Were you still living with your wife in the same place, or you were separated from your wife
During
at that time?
We were in Kraków Plaszow till the November 1944, from March 1943 to November 1944.
We know from all accounts that Plaszow was a very bad camp.
There was in the beginning there was a labor camp, but they were, every day there will be killing and murder and beating and persecution and tremendous hardship. My wife was going outside because Madrid in the beginning has a factory outside before they brought these factories to the Plaszow ghetto. So she always asking, what is the score today? 20-0, 69-0. One day was 40-1 because one of the guy who's supposed to be executed jumped on one of the soldiers, and with his own bayonet he killed the soldier, but he was executed. So you see, they were the only one case.
So that they were executed or shot because they resisted?
There were no reason because they resisted, because sometimes they were in selection, sometimes they were caught on the outside papers, they got caught, and they were, any little reason could
Were you able to wear your own clothes in Plaszow?
In Plaszow we were wearing our own clothes. By the end, before we left Plaszow, they painted our clothes with the colors, red, crosses, everything on it. Yeah. We didn't have the stripe. They were people who were wearing stripes already. You understand? When they came from another camps, when they liquidated the surrounding camps. But people who were from...
Who was in charge of Plaszow?
Amon Ged was a Hauptsturm period, yes. Amon Ged was in charge from the beginning till the liquidation. This means...
And then he came to Auschwitz.
Then, no, Amon Ged was arrested, and he was sitting in jail for robbing German government with the Jewish goods he was stealing from the Jews, the diamonds and jewelry and gold and everything. And he was living like a king in Kraków Plaszow. He has his own villa there. And
yes, sorry. Yes, he knew Schindler.
What?
Yes. There was a documentary film made here on Schindler, and the mistress of Amon Ged testified.
Yes.
Was interviewed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you see the documentary? What was made by
in England?
Yeah, in
no,
England.
but Poldek is going to show me.
Well,
that's very interesting. So Amon Ged was in charge of the camp in Plaszow.
Yes.
Who was running the camp?
The SS.
Kapos.
The SS.
Only Dessers. There
No,
were
no,
no
they were a
Jewish
couple. They
couples.
were a Jewish couples. You understand? This was a little bit different than in any other camp.
Well, could you
They
tell
were
us?
mostly people who were known by each other. I would say, in general terms, all the couples, with few exemptions, they were not as bad, or they were in Auschwitz, or they were in Gross-Rosen, or in any other camp, because they know each other, and some of them, they were from prominent families and things like this. So they behaved themselves, I would say, decent. You understand? They were exemption, you understand? And those people mostly were all punished sooner or later, or by Germans, or by
the Jews.
You
Yes.
see? So this is what it is.
Was
Now,
that,
to point at the name will be not fair.
No. We are not after that. But the general attitude of the couples towards
Supporting, I would say.
rather
Supporting.
Yes.
Supporting.
And in Płaszów itself, were the Jews working?
I was working in a garage.
And
the
other
Amon-Get
prisoners? And other prisoners in Płaszów, where were they working?
Oh, they were Barackenbau, they were Madrid, they were Schindler's camp. This was the brush company, they were Schuster.
So it
they
was
were
a large
lots
camp.
the idea came from Schindler, who said to get, he wants to make money, establish factories, and utilize those people this way, because they were very essential to
the
welfare
German
of
camp,
Mr. Amon-Get, you
Yeah,
understand?
yeah.
They were some protection, but he was coming at night or during the day and could shoot anybody on spot.
So Amon-Get actually was he a military man?
He was a Hauptsturmführer SS, this very high rank.
And Schindler was
She
not
was
a military.
he was working during the war. He was in the General Canaries spy organization, military intelligence.
Yes. And were they friendly? Get
They
and
Schindler
socializing?
Schindler pretend himself to have certain benefits, to be very friendly with Amon-Get by bribing him, giving him a very expensive gift like a BMW car or gold cigarette case or liquor and vodka as much he wanted, and he befriended himself for purpose to get as many people as possible. And he tried many times to take me and my wife from Płaszów to Amalia, but I was working in the garage, and the garage was strictly to the disposal of Amon-Get as a welder, and there was only 2 welders in the whole camp. There was Mr. Mandel and myself, and he said, who is working for me cannot work for you. It's good for me, it's not good for you. You see? And but by the end, when they were making the list to go to Schindler camp over there in Brinlitz, he put my name and my wife's name. No. Schindler put the name.
On his list.
On his list.
Yes, and Get did not protest anymore.
No, because he got permission to take 300 more men and about 150 or 200 more women. Total, he got permission 1,200 people. It was 900 men and 300 women. And he didn't have, because he liquidated anyway the Płaszów.
Yes.
The only person he didn't want to give it is his personal the girl or the woman who was her cook. She was a cook, his cook, and she was the servant over there in the villa. He always said, she will be the less Jewish, what I will kill, what I will shoot.
And that was the one to whom Schindler
played card to win her, and he won her, and she lived in Jerusalem, and she always was one of my students too.
Yes. And where did you live in Płaszów? In barracks?
In barracks.
Were the barracks pre-existent in Płaszów, or
they were built by the Barackenbau before the main body of Kraków ghetto came in, but they were not enough barracks that they started to build constantly constantly they were improving and building and things like this.
And what happened to the Polish population of Płaszów?
There were Polish population in Płaszów were kicked out from the villas and the houses, and the Germans took over. And later on, they opened also a Polish camp in Płaszów for Polish population who was sent there for some like overnight breaking the curfew or some other small
breaches.
yeah.
Did you have any contact with the non-Jewish prisoners?
Yes,
of
we
Płaszów?
helped them tremendously.
You helped them?
Yes, we helped them. We helped them more than they could help us.
How come?
Because they didn't have nothing. I mean, later on they were getting some packages. Then we became quite a bit friends. Both sides were helping each other very much. There were no friction or anything. And many of them, thanks to Jewish people in the camp, because some people were going outside, they bringing some food. They were dangerous always, and some people lost their life because they got caught. They bringing the things. So the condition was very helping each other.
Do you remember at what stage, chronological, at what date Schindler gave the list or had the list and the permission, I suppose, to take 1,200 people?
He went to Berlin and he explained to the Berlin office of armament that he is transferring his factory from Poland, who was making a special shell, artillery shells. You understand? And he has a factory in Brinitz. He purchased the factory over there, and he would like to transfer, but he has not enough people because he has only about 600 total. He needs about double amount of money, so they give him permission to draw some people. And when the Emalia came to Kraków, and they were liquidating Emalia, and he was transferring all the machinery and everything to Brinitz.
Emalia, that was not originally an armament factory.
In the beginning was Emalia factory. This means they were making some utensils for the army, and some of them we were helping him to sell on the black market. He was making tremendous amount of money, but for this money he could bribe the official. For example, in Emalia, no German could enter the premises of the factory. They could stay around, but not inside. You see, so he was making his own rule. By bribing those people, they accepted his rule.
Yes.
You see,
and
with vodka.
Of course, his treatment of the Jews working for him, what was it like?
They were extraordinary. For example, I will tell you, we who were in the concentration camp Płaszów were dreaming to get to the paradise of Emalia. This was the difference. We called Emalia a paradise.
So
everybody knew who Schindler is. Yeah. Some way, somehow, the Germans couldn't figure it out. They arrested him 3 times under all kind of pretexts.
Yeah. But neither you nor your wife worked for him.
No, not at all. My wife was working for
While you were working for Get, did you maintain some sort of a contact with Schindler?
Yes, he tried few times to take us out, my wife and me. He knew that I will never go without my wife, and she will never go without me. So, but Amon Get never allowed him because I was the only welder in the garage.
And at what time was Płaszów, when was Płaszów liquidated?
Płaszów was liquidated by December 1944. There were about 200 or 300 people left in Płaszów. The rest was already, and one time was about 25 to 30,000 people in Płaszów.
You remember what time was the Kraków ghetto liquidated?
Kraków ghetto was liquidated on my birthday, March 20, 1943. So I have to pretty good idea of the date of liquidation.
Yes.
Kraków was a tremendous pressure on the Jew because every time more people from surrounding area they were bringing to ghetto, and was no place for those people. They were starting to making smaller ghetto, and sending on random. And they were giving a blue shine ticket and then permission and numbers and things like this. And it was only about 15,000 people from ghetto supposed to go to Plaszow, but they didn't transfer 15. I
And
don't think so. Even 10,000 people.
And you and your wife were among the people who went to Plaszow.
Yes.
But your parents.
My parents were in Sanok, and
you never saw them.
We knew that the Sanok was liquidated.
Yeah.
That the ghetto was liquidated. And
Anybody else from your family stayed in Krakow?
No, I don't think. I don't remember any of my. They were two cousins, but they somehow. One of my cousins was with me in Plaszow, and he went with a transport to another Stalowa Wola, to another camp, and never heard about him.
Mr. Pfefferberg, did you think about it, and do you have an idea how come that you stayed among the last 15 or 10,000 Jews in Krakow?
That they took us to Plaszow?
Yes. How come that you never were deported from Krakow, but you stayed?
Because I was working in this time for Heres Unterkunft. This is a army depot when we were repairing also clothes and things like this. And this was protected by the government, by the army,
yes.
Till the liquidation. And we got the permission.
This is what I like to explain and to clarify, that you were actually working in a unit that was working for the German economy or government.
For the army. That was for the Air Force.
And you were protected by the Arbeitskarte that allowed you to stay.
Exactly. And my wife was working for Madrid, and he protected their people.
Yeah.
People who were working for Schindler was protected by Schindler Company. They were supposed to be highly skilled people.
What happened to the people who worked for the Judenrat? Judenrat.
Some people went to different camps. Some people went to Plaszow. They liquidated Judenrat.
Together with the ghetto.
Yes.
Together with the ghetto. Now that was rather unusual, wasn't it? That you stayed in Plaszow till December 44.
No, I didn't say till December, because the Schindler people went to Brindlitz through Grossrosen, the men and women through Auschwitz in November 1940, before the liquidation. I don't remember. We went about, I think so, end of October.
I see.
But it was already, when we arrived in Brindlitz, it was already November.
That was Germany.
There was Sudeten-German.
Sudeten-German. So
Germany.
what happened? So what? Your wife was on a separate list?
My wife was on the list of the 300 women, and I was on the list of the 900 men. They put us in the cattle train, and we were going supposed to go to Brindlitz, but we landed in Grossrosen. And we were afraid that this is the end of the line. And when we went to shower, I was looking only in the shower, what is coming, the gas or the water?
So that means that you were aware by that time.
Oh yeah, we were aware very well what is going in Auschwitz and Grossrosen and Dachau, in Buchenwald, in all the camps.
And you believed it?
I believe 100% I believe in it. They even were in intention to build a gas chamber in Kraków Plaszow, but they couldn't get together. So they were executing them over there on the hill, and we burned the body over there on the hills. You see? When the German was liquidating the Kraków Plaszow, they exhumed all this body there, and they burned about 25,000 bodies on the hill. The whole city smelled with burned flesh.
Were you engaged in that? Forced to do it?
They were all for everybody who was in the camp has to help to burn the body. People were coming from outside after full day work. They were brought to them, and they have to put the body over there on the fire, digging out and all things like this.
So when you came to Grossrosen, your wife came to Grossrosen?
No, my wife didn't come to Grossrosen. My wife stayed still in Kraków. We left ahead of the women.
Yeah.
Women left about a week or 10 days later. We landed in Grossrosen, and then we were sure that is the end of the story. Coincidentally, about a week later or 10 days later, they give us a quarter of bread, a small amount of bread, and they put us on the train.
Were you still in your
We were,
civilian clothes?
no, they took away everything from us in Gross-Rosen, and they give us the stripe uniform. And we went on the train. We still didn't know where we're going, but we knew that we're going out of Gross-Rosen. You see, and we know that people were dying there by hundreds every day. They throwing them in the quarry over there from 800 meters down, and the people were dying like flies there, you see. And we went from Gross-Rosen, and we landed.
Could you just...
And we landed in Berlin, and there was
for the sake
Schindler.
of record, where was Gross-Rosen?
Gross-Rosen was also in the Sudeten-German.
So you came to Brinnen?
Brinnlitz. Brennetz in Czechoslovakia, Brinnlitz in German, and in the factory, who was there? Oskar Schindler. The first thing, we surrounded Oskar Schindler and we asked him, where are the women? He said, I don't know, but I will find out. And a couple days later, he said, I'm sorry to tell you, the women are in Auschwitz. They went from Kraków to Auschwitz. I will do everything possible to pull them out from Auschwitz. And he took one of the German Aufseherin, you know, one of the guard, German woman guard, who was a very pretty woman, give her lots of jewelry and liquor and good food. And she said, you give the gifts to Mr. Hess in Auschwitz from Mr. Schindler, who is coming to pick up his women. He came over to Auschwitz and he asked for the woman, and the Hess told him, I don't know where the women, maybe they are not alive anymore. But some records show that they were still alive, and they were about 2 weeks there, or maybe even more. My wife said to me, she was very sick, in Auschwitz, that they will stay another week. I don't think so that any of the women will survive. They called them up, and
300 of them.
They tried to get 300, but they only found out 299. One already was killed. And all the women by the list, and interesting, there were children, 2 girls, 12, 13 years, 14 years old.
Really?
So when the Hess was asking, you consider this a professional metal worker? Oh, those are the best. Because when you look on the finger of those girls, they are very long, very skinny, and they clean the boxes, the shells, so good. No any other word can do it. That's the reason they are very professional.
Well, go on, that's all right.
So
how many children were among them?
in Amalia, in the Brinlis was quite a bit. The smallest one was Rishu Horowitz, who was about 6 years old. Oleg was about 12 years old.
How many children?
Children was there,
more or less, 10,
or
20.
about maybe, when we consider children up to 16 years of age, there were quite a bit, maybe 20, 30.
So he actually managed to get the women out of Auschwitz.
Schindler was trying to keep family together. You understand? When he took father and mother to his, he took also the children to his camp. He didn't want to break it. His idea was to be a Mother Noe, to create a future new Jewish, when he can save them, that they can survive, there will be a future new Jewish community. So they have children, women, and men, professional workers, and so far and so far.
And Hess gave him, the year was 44.
The year was mid of November 1944.
Were the women tattooed?
No, the women were not tattooed. They were destined to die, so they didn't need to waste the time to tattoo them. And they came in, and I couldn't believe it, my eyes, when I saw them coming about 6 o'clock in the morning, when still was foggy, and the gate to the factory open, and we see shadows coming in, and we stay on the balcony and watch them.
What do you mean on the balcony? You had
because
balcony?
we were having our quarters on the balcony, and it was divided, half of the quarters for men and half of the quarters for women. And Schindler was standing downstairs surrounded by all these guards and everybody there.
You were housed in Bürnen, not in barracks?
No, we were in the same building where the factory was there. And
must have been a big building to
there was
house
tremendous.
1,200
yes,
people.
There was tremendous factory. And then he was standing over there, surrounded by all the SS people and the commandant. They said to the women, "Now, finally you are with me. Don't worry, you will be safe." And I couldn't believe it what I heard. And said, "The best soup is waiting for you. You freshen up and you will have a food coming to you." And they came to.
And the SS
was there, but they were already bribed by Schindler too.
By Schindler.
But there were still lots of obstacles, you see. Schindler spent, since November 1944 till May 8, 4 million marks of his own money.
For what?
For helping, bribing, and saving the $1,100.
The 1,100 people.
1,200 people. 1,200 people. And the most important thing, in January came a transport of one wagon containing about over 130 people from Goleszów. And those people were traveling 7 days and 7 nights without opening, without food, in a sub-zero temperature, and they were completely frozen.
Where were they traveling to?
Traveling from camp to camp, nobody wants to accept them. They were from Goleszów, this was sub-camp of Auschwitz, and they were coming to
after
the was evacuated. And the commandant didn't want to accept them. Mrs. Schindler, wife of Mr. Schindler, said, "We have to have those people. Those people are essential for our work." She said, "Those people are dead. No, we bring them in 2-3 days and they will be working." Schindler wasn't present. She found him out. Schindler came in and asked to open this. And I was the welder who cut out the ice and the door, and we pulled out 16 people who were dead. And the rest people, another few hours, will not survive. They never worked from January to the liberation. Mrs. Schindler and Mr. Schindler were taking care of those people.
How many did you say there were?
There were about 116 survived, and 16 was dead. And the 116...
Men and women?
They were only men. Yeah. And these men, you understand, have no chance to survive. When we were not open, we heard only
they were
voices.
in sealed trucks.
Yeah. And when we opened, you couldn't recognize a man or woman, they were a skeleton. You see, Mrs. Schindler and Mr. Schindler provide the food, force the document to get some more food for these people, and medication, any way, any means he could do it, and he brought those people to life. These unbelievable things never happened. The 16 people, the commandant gave order to burn them in the oven in the factory over there. And Schindler said, "Not in my factory." He went to the priest, to the church over there, because there was no Jewish cemetery there, and asked him for permission to bury him over there on cemetery.
Was Schindler and his wife religious people? Were they religious people? She
was very religious. I don't think so he was religious.
No.
He was a Catholic, but he was not religious.
Not religious.
And the priest told him that he cannot give him on the cemetery, but he can give him just next to cemetery a piece of land that he can bury those people. And this was the first time in the history of a camp that religious services were performed when we buried those 16 people.
Jewish religious
services. The only one person died in the camp of Schindler in Brünitz, was a dear friend of my wife and mine, and sister of my students, and she died natural causes. She has a cancer of the bone, and she died. But she was so taken care by Mr. and Mrs. Schindler all the time during the sickness of her.
What were the provisions? What was the living conditions in that camp? The living conditions.
The living condition
barracks,
was
dormitories.
there were a dormitory on the first floor of the camp. We have a quarters for ourselves. There were 2 people in the bunk.
And
but we have a blankets, we have pillows and straw and everything, and was taking care, and was a people who were having a responsibility to clean the barracks. This is not the barracks, they were
dormitories. Men separated,
men separate. Women were separate with a little mesh screen, you understand?
Yeah.
But we have a tremendous way to contact them.
Facilities
were very
wash.
sufficient. To wash was facility, and latrine was a very large one, not as a luxury.
It was still a camp.
Still was a camp.
And what about food?
Food was, in the beginning, we have enough food. Later on, in the beginning of the 1945, was a little bit more difficult, but still somehow he managed to gather food, and by requisition.
So his relationship to you was like to his children. He considered that
he called all of us my children. You are Schindlerjuden.
How old was he?
He was in 1945. He was 37 years old.
A very young man.
Very young, but he looks tremendous mature. His voice was magnetic voice. He spoke so beautifully, so friendly. Nobody was afraid of him. Everybody, he has a little smile or little hello and things like this, you see. So it was...
and did he...
we knew how long he will be alive, how long he will be in charge. He will never say. The last time what he found out, that the graves were digged for the 1,300 people. Now was 1,300, over 1,300 people, by the Russian prisoner who was not far away, and that was an order to execute. So he maneuvered this way that he sent the commandant of our camp to the Eastern Front. There's a too big story to tell you in the things. It's written
just quickly, yes.
Yes. And he staged a little circus with him, and he reported the guy is getting drunk every night, and he is not suitable to be commandant, and he got somebody else, and they took all the younger SS people to the Eastern Front, and they replaced with the older Wehrmacht. This was not, they were still in the SS uniform, but they were all retired people.
Yes.
And Schindler told us that this possibility that we will be executed, and he said that we will have to create some group of few people who were in military, who knows how to handle themselves, and we will have to start to defend. We have only one gun, what Schindler provide. We have sticks, we have metal iron bars.
So he encouraged the resistance.
Yeah, resistance. And we organized 15 of us. And we have an order from him that on the day what he signaled, we will disarm the Gestapo soldiers over there. We did. We disarmed them without even firing.
So
wood.
it came really to such a day.
Yes, and we kept them over there in the cellar till the Russian came on the 8th. On the May the 11th, they staged a kangaroo court, the Russian,
for the
Gestapo, and for the soldiers. They were old people they put in the service as a guard. Probably they didn't know what they were doing themselves in this time, and executed them. And we have tremendous the leadership, and I was one of the spokesmen, that we are not murderer, and the court is not a legal court of law, and we will not do it. You want to take them out from him, you take them out from him, but we will not commit any murder here. And what happened to those people, we don't know. They were taken.
And although they were guards who came fairly late to you.
Very late, very
yes.
just by the end of the war.
So what you are saying is that although you had the Russians gave you the permission to kill Germans.
No, they create a kangaroo court.
Yeah, well,
and they've said you can do with these people what you want. You want to shoot them, shoot them.
But you refuse.
The whole
how
not me only, they were
yes.
all the leadership of our.
Now what happened to Schindler?
Schindler we knew that Schindler will not survive when the Russians will arrested him, because he was a German, he was officially director of the factory and using a slave labor. So we organized a group of 8 people, young people, who took a car, and Schindler, his wife, and all his belongings, and they were going towards the Americans. And we were surrounded. Brinley was in the center. Around the Brinley was about 100,000 German army. And from the east side, they were surrounded by Russian. From the west side, they were surrounded by American, English forces, and French forces, yes. And they were like in the cattle. And we were just in the center, a little point in the center.
So you took the car and drove to the
west? Drove
him
to the west, through the French line, to the French American line. In between, the Russians stopped them.
How come you had the car?
Because we have Schindler's car. We have trucks, we have cars.
Were you still in the prisoners' uniform?
No, we took the overalls, army workers.
Overall, yes.
And we were in the overall. We put Schindler in the overall too, and he became a Häftling, liberated by but which forces will be a first one. And they were stopped by the Russians, some outfit. They robbed them up, took everything from everybody there, even though they said that
Were you in the group of
No, I wasn't there in the group. They were some friend of mine, some students, and they delivered Schindler to the Frenchmen and then to the English people, and he was safe.
Yes.
And then we got together after the liberation. When I came to Munich, we saw Schindler till I left. When I was leaving, I said, Oskar, for your deeds, the whole world should know what you did, because this was heroic deed. Not only that you risk your own life, your family life, because everything was penalty of that, but you use all the money, what you made it, during the period of time in Kraków, to save us. We never give you any money, we never give you any financial support. You use all the money, and according to the figures what we estimated, you spent 4 million mark in a period of 7 months, because he has to pay a day 6 mark for a man and 5 marks for a woman. Now multiply by 1,300 people, this was like 7,000-8,000 marks.
But what happened to the products that he produced?
The product was never perfect, never one shell was used in it, and he was investigated while his product is not good. And they couldn't find anything, because our electrician and our engineer fixed the machinery so good that looks perfect, and why these shells were no good.
You didn't know.
But he has to deliver certain amount of quotas. He was buying on the black market, paying under the table from another manufacturer who were making exactly to deliver quotas. Good shelves to them. He said he was always proud and said, thank God, my shelves were never used and never killed anybody. He was an extraordinary man. And after the war was interesting, we tried
Where did he live after the war?
First in Munich, and then in Frankfurt. Then we got money, certain amount of money, $15,000. We want to bring him to United States, but the U.S. government didn't allow him to come over because he was a Nazi party man. A good Nazis they are not bringing. They brought all the bad Nazis over there. So he got $15,000, and he took 4 Jewish families, because they didn't have money, to go with him to Argentina. And the 4 families went with him to Argentina, but he couldn't establish himself because there were Germans there, and he didn't feel comfortable. So he left his wife and he came to Frankfurt and lived in Frankfurt, tried to establish himself, but they considered him as a traitor, and they were trying to make attempts on his life. They insulted him. They called him Jew lover, and so far and so far. So, but then he became a pauper. He didn't have any money. After the war, he became a pauper. He didn't do what Madrid did, took millions of dollars and he went to Vienna and lived happy after. He spent every dollar, and on the May 11, he was a pauper. He didn't have a penny to...
Madrid, he was considered a righteous Gentile.
In 1962, the Israeli government and Yad Vashem was not even built yet. They gave him the medal of righteous Gentile for the deed he did, but not any person could accomplish. There were lots of Gentiles. There's lots of people honored by Israeli government. There are about over 6,000 trees. What they were saving, one person, except the Wallenberg who saved 100,000 Jews or more, but he was in a completely different position. He was a representative of Swedish government, and he was untouchable. Schindler was a simple citizen of Germany who was punished.
Was he Volksdeutscher?
No, he was a German.
German.
The whole family was German for centuries. You see, and he was could be only penalized by the law of Gestapo in this time, penalty of death of helping the Jews. But was very lucky, he survived.
Did he have any children?
No, he never had a children. He survived. He was invited by me twice to United States. He was honored there. He was invited.
Was he allowed to come?
Oh yes. This time already his reputation was established. He was invited by Schindler Jews who live in Israel every year for a couple months to recuperate it, because he was a very heavy smoker and heavy drinker. And they were bringing him back to life. I remember one day when I was over there, Dr. Bieberstein, who was also a survivor of Emalia, Schindler's camp, said, I don't know how this guy can still be alive. He doesn't have lungs, he doesn't have a stomach, he doesn't have a kidney, he doesn't have a heart, and he's still alive. Dear God probably knows what he's doing. And Rabbi Levertov, who was a rabbi in the camp and performed all the services to bury the people and all the Friday and Saturday services in the camp, when I interviewed him for the book, I asked him, Rabbi, tell me, what do you think about Schindler? He looks at me and said to me, you know, as a rabbi, I have to believe it in one almighty, dear God. Schindler was another God for me. This was his statement. For all of us, he was a God.
So he lived to the end of his life in Frankfurt.
In Frankfurt, we were supporting him. We were collecting money between the Schindler lists, and I was sending him the money. We established his story. I sold his story to movie, and I received $50,000 for it, and I give it to him the money. He got only 45 because the attorney took 5, and he became again Schindler.
But there is no movie so far.
No movie, no book. In 1980, I was lucky to meet Thomas Keneally, Australian novelist, very famous. He came to my store, and this story is very well known, and I will not report it about it. You can add it when you wish to it. And I convinced him to write a book about this. He never asked for any money from me. All the other writers that I approached for the last 20, 30 years, they all wanted $100,000. When I will have the money, I will have hesitated to give it to him to write the Schindler story. But coincidentally, I struggled all my time in America. I was making good living, but not to be in position to pay such amount of money.
They should pay you because you sold them a story.
They never want to pay to anybody. They want to get money. Thomas Keneally was convinced by me that this story should be written. And he was a young man. He was only 46 years old in this time. And he decided to do it. Maybe my power of persuasion, I don't know. Maybe dear God creates situation like this, I don't know. I can talk for hours about this. And he wrote a book, what was printed in America under the title Schindler List, but I personally didn't like it. My idea was to call this Schindler's Ark, because this was like a modern novel.
Schindler's
Ark,
Ark.
because this was like a modern novel. He saved Chris cut of Jewish community, and when nobody will survive, only we will survive, still will be a creation of new Jewish community. And the book became international bestseller, not only in America or in England, Australia or Canada, but became international in every language that was printed. It was in 14 languages printed, including Hebrew, and became bestseller. This was unusual story. In general terms, Holocaust book doesn't sell for some reason. They are more like a documentary. And this documentary, this book, is showing the story from the other side of the fence. The Holocaust is a background to his heroism. When will be not Holocaust, he will never be a hero. He became a hero because he fell in love with those people who were working for him, and he saw the tragedy and he knew what will happen. And we sent him in 1943 to Budapest, and he reported to Joint Distribution Committee in Budapest that the Polish Jewry will be completely liquidated and ask for help. You understand? And the documents are in United States in archive. We found the documents over there. And he risked his life doing this. So he accomplished something what no any other human being
How
could
come that you sold the rights of the story to a film, and the film is being made only now? How many years?
The story
later?
was sold to first to MGM, and MGM.
What year about?
In 1963. In 1963, I sold the story, and I got 50,000, but I give it to Schindler because this was his life story, there was his money, and nobody has a right to have any penny from this money except the attorney who got 10%. And the $50,000 in this time was like you will give him $500,000 today or more.
Sure.
And he really started to be her director, Schindler, what we want him to be. We restore his dignity, what he deserved to be restored. And the Schindler Jews were very helpful by helping in every occasion. We adore him. You understand? So nobody was interested to make the story. It was not a period. Till in 1982, when the book came out and became the bestseller and we became Booker Prize winner, Universal Studio decided to purchase the right from MGM Studio, and I became technical advisor to Steven Spielberg, for whom they bought the movie. And Steven Spielberg told me 2 weeks ago that he wasn't, I asked him the same question what you were asking me, why it took him 10 years. Yeah. He wasn't ready to make this movie, besides he was waiting for a screenplay what he considered proper for this particular film. And there were two different people writing. Thomas Keneally was the first one, and Spielberg didn't accept his, and I told Thomas Keneally that he has to change it and improve it. He said, Paul, don't worry, I have 3 more rewrites and we will do it a very good screenplay. And I am 100% sure that the best screenplay could only Thomas Keneally write. But they changed it, they took another Mr. Kurt Lutke, who didn't know any idea, and he held the project for 2 years. Then they give to Steven Zalian, who became nominated for Oscar for his Awakening, a very famous movie.
Yes.
And
Oscar.
he wrote the screenplay,
Yes.
what Spielberg considered good enough to start the film. He went to Poland 3 times in 1992, because he didn't know for sure where he will film the picture. But I convinced him that the only place to make this picture a real historical document is in Poland, in the places. He agreed with me. He went there on the 28th of February. I couldn't go, even though I have the ticket. I was in a hospital in this time. I was having a second time correction on my bypasses. And he started. I came over there on the 1st of April. What I saw in the next 2.5 weeks is extraordinary. It will be filmed in black and white because it's better filming in the mood of the story instead in color. When I saw the amount of extras, 2,000 extras.
Where was it filmed?
In Kraków. All the places where this happened.
Not in Płaszów.
Not in Płaszów is such built up that is fast, but next to the Płaszów he built a camp. Yeah. And was so extraordinary the scene of the liquidation of ghetto, execution of the hospital. When I was watching this with my eyes, I forgot in the first minute I was thinking that I'm still living this through the whole thing. And then when I was viewing the picture on the screen, looks so dramatically, so real, that is unbelievable. So I even asked him, tell me please, how long will be the movie? He said about 3 hours. It's an extra long movie. Yes. And I asked him, what do you do with the rest of the film? Because I have enough film to make 3 different movies from the film. I said, give it to Wiesenthal Center, to museum in Washington, to the university, so they can view this, because so realistic was everything performed. He is an extraordinary young fellow, extraordinary movie producer, and he lived through this, he was living through the story. He penetrated the centrum of the whole story and was so real that my wife said when she saw the German Amon Goeth, who is playing by very famous Ralph Fiennes, is an English actor. Ralph Fiennes, he's an English actor. Yeah, he will be on the 26th of May, have a picture show on television, Dangerous Man, about Lawrence of Arabia. And yeah, and the most important role is Ichushtein, the Jewish philosopher who was leading Schindler through all the years to the greatness, and was like his second thought.
Ego, yes.
Yeah, and is played now by Ben Kingsley, who was Gandhi in the film Gandhi, and Oskar Schindler is playing now by Irish actor, very famous in America, living in New York, Liam Neeson. And all the characters are extremely capable to the roles, and Spielberg is very, very happy with them, and they cooperate with them. I never saw that. Normally all the famous actors and actresses are like prima donna. Now my role is played by the Israeli. He has about over 20 Israeli actors and actresses in the picture. He's using about 2,000 extra, and about 30,000 people is involved in production of the film in Poland, in Kraków. And this what was the right way to do. The premiere will be in December of 1993, and I hope you will see the film here too.
I have read, because Poldek Rosner showed me that, a letter from Spielberg which deeply moved me and impressed me, that there is a reunion at his grave. Yes.
This was my little suggestion to Spielberg, to make the reunion over there in Jerusalem. That we should
tell us how come that Schindler was buried in Israel?
Well, this is a story for itself. Schindler and I were invited for 25th anniversary in 1973 of Israel independence as an honored guest of government of Israel.
Yeah.
And when we were sitting over there, he said that he would like to be buried in Jerusalem. I said, you have a crazy idea. Who will bury here? You know, you were a Nazi, you were joking with him, you know. No, Paul, this is weird. I feel at home here. He was very sick. He knew that he will not live too long.
How old was he when he died?
In 1973, he was born in 1908. So it's
it doesn't matter. We'll work it out.
65 years old.
Yes.
You see, I talked with the people. Supreme Court Justice Dr. Moshe Beisky, who was survivor of Schindler's camp, and Mr. Ichushtein, who was his spirit, and I was talking with Mr. Sternberg and all the leaders over there, and we decide what he's alive, what we are worrying. But a year and a half later, he died with permission of Israeli government and German government. We exhumated his body. We took the body to Israel. We had a military funeral when the priest and the rabbi was conducting the services in the church, in the Catholic church, and then we buried him on the Catholic cemetery in Jerusalem on the Mount Zion, Mount Zion hills over there, and he's buried.
Beautiful end to a very unusual and a very beautiful story. Mr. Pfefferberg, we are greatly indebted to you that you gave us your time, and I feel very privileged that I heard the story from your
But this is
mouth.
such tremendous story that in a short period of time is physically impossible.
But
Now,
you covered that very well.
I
Your
tried
story
my
was
best.
very well structured, was clear,
I tried my best.
and absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
No wonder that you could have persuaded Thomas Keneally to write the book.
I just talked with him yesterday.
I don't think we are, I think it's finished. I want to tell you that I am a survivor of a person who was very much similar to Oskar Schindler. His name was Alfred Rosner, except that he
I know, I heard about this man. He was in Benjin factory. A lady approached me.
And
She's a professor in one of the university in
Hanka Brahma.
Mirka something, no?
I don't know, maybe.
And she told me.
Yes,
And
yes,
she told
yes,
me she
yes,
needed.
yes. Her parents were in the.
Yes.
Her parents
Yes.
are from my town.
Yes.
Yes, she's a bit from Michigan.
Yes.
She was in
and we are
Israel.
helping her to do this story.
Yes, she wanted to do a film about.
Yes,
it.
and she's making the film.
She's making.
We gave
the
her
film.
some money too.
Yes, she is one of the children who were smuggled
survivor.
out. Alfred Rosner was unfortunately hanged by the Germans in January '44.
But he was killed by Germans.
Arrested by Gestapo. The act of accusation was Judenfreund, and he was killed by the Gestapo.
Sure.
There are many survivors, but
This story should be told too.
I am telling this story whenever
At least
I
we can get at least post-mortem.
Post-human, yes. I am telling
Still
the
I see
story.
it's moving.
No. That is, but the camera is finished.
Oh, you see the thing.
Yes, yes.
Can you
It was-
review something to show how I look?
Well,
it's like-
Philip can do it. He told me that.
Yeah.
Philip,